Hey guys.
So, what are the implications for Massachusetts of the death of the Republican ACA repeal bill?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is that we're going to continue to move forward with the waiver that we worked so hard to secure from the Obama administration, with the assumption that we're going to be able to implement it. I mean, there's a lot of important reforms in there that were agreed to, including making it possible for us to create additional supports for people who are dealing with addiction and additional supports for people who are dealing with behavioral and mental health issues. And I think the other thing it certainly suggests is that there may be an opportunity to continue to pursue other adjustments that would sort of be Massachusetts specific. And one of the things we did was write a letter to Secretary Price, which outlined a whole bunch of, because he had said to us when we were down for the National Governors Association meeting, if there are things you think we should do to make the waiver process better, you should let us know. And so we wrote him a letter on that, and we'll likely follow up with his office and see if we can have a conversation about that with him and with Administrator Verna as well.
Governor, assuming you do pursue additional waivers, Representative Lyons is filing legislation that would have MassHealth enrollees pay or contribute to their health care on a sliding scale, and also work requirements for Medicaid enrollees. Would you support either of those provisions?
Well, keep in mind that most folks on MassHealth currently pay for certain parts of their service. I mean, they pay co-pays on their pharmacy benefit. If they're enrolled through a WRAP program, a bunch of folks who currently have access to private coverage, Medicaid covers certain pieces of it, but it's not the primary cover, they pay there. There are rules and standards at the federal level with respect to how much you can expect people to pay out of pocket who are enrolled in MassHealth. But that's certainly been historically something the Commonwealth has done, and I would expect that we continue to do that sort of thing going forward. I mean, one of the big issues on the work piece, I guess what I would say is that one of the big issues we face is just the opposite here in Massachusetts, which is we have literally hundreds of thousands of people who have access to coverage through their employer right now who are working, who are not taking the coverage that's available through their employer and instead are ending up on MassHealth. I think one of the things we would probably pursue would be some effort to try to re-engage the federal government around the original structure we had here in Massachusetts, which is if you had access to coverage through your employer, you didn't automatically qualify to be on MassHealth, which worked quite well here for 7 or 8 years.
So you don't support a work requirement?
I think many of the people who are already on MassHealth who are able-bodied are working. I mean, that's been proven out by the data.
Last question. What is the latest on the employer assessment proposal? Are you near reaching an adjusted proposal for that?
Well, one of the things we said when we made that original proposal was we were anxious to have other people suggest. They didn't like our proposal to suggest others, but that we felt we had a problem there that people needed to be aware of and needed to work to help us solve for. And people have popped up with a lot of different ideas and suggestions, and I fully expect that conversation is going to be one that's going to go on into the spring.
What is your strategy on
thoughts on increasing taxes for millionaires in order to bring revenue to the state?
Well, if you're referring to the ballot question, that ballot question has a few more stops on the train, so-called, that it needs to go through before it ends up in front of the voters. And if it does, obviously, we'll have plenty of opportunity to talk about it. But I've said for a long time that I think state government ought to be focusing on getting its own act together as opposed to raising taxes on people here in Massachusetts.
Another proposal on the ballot is to reduce taxes. So what are your thoughts on that in order to give people a break, especially if the state is able to bring revenue to the state through other means?
Which proposal is that?
The retailers are floating, going to the ballot to lower the sales tax to the 4 to 4.5% range. Is that something you could support?
Well, like I said, with the millionaire's tax, that one obviously has a long way to go before it ends up coming before the voters, and if it does, obviously we'll talk about it then. But I did support back in 2010 the idea of reducing the sales tax from 6.2 to 5, and there's no question that retailers in Massachusetts face tremendous competition and pressure from our colleagues north of the border who don't have a sales tax at all.
All right, thanks everybody.
Okay, guys, we'll see you.
What's your strategy?
A dialogue and discussion about what to do to deal with the fact that we do have a lot of people who are employed which is a good thing, rolling into the MassHealth program, many of whom have access to coverage that's available through their employers. And I think that's a good conversation to have, and I'm glad that it's prompted a lot of suggestions. There are literally probably half a dozen ideas that people have kicked around at this point, and obviously the legislature is going to have to factor that into their budget development process, and so will we.
Thanks, everybody.
See you guys.